Let's take a look at a different type of punctuation mark, which is the question mark. Yes, we've all seen the question mark. Maybe we're too used to using it more than once at the end of our messages and text as these things. So these are what we call the question marks. Now, how are they used? Number one, after direct questions. Whenever you have a sentence that asks a direct question, then we use a question mark at the end of it. Let's take an example. How are you? Simple question. And since it is a direct question or directly asking you for something or about something, we use a question mark at the end of it. Now, you have to be really careful not to place a question mark at the end of indirect questions. Those are statements that talk about something being asked or questioned. Let's take an example. She asked how I am. So here, although I am talking about something that was asked as a question, I will still not use a question mark at the end of this statement because it is not a direct question. It is in fact an indirect question. So be careful not to add the question mark at the end of such statements. Now let's take a look at how in other ways we can use the question mark. Number one, after a sentence which is half statement and half question. What does that mean? Now, you might have heard of question tags. Let's take an example to show you what I mean. Let's say, this is yours, isn't it? So here, I have used a part question and the rest of the sentence is a statement. So whenever you have sentences which are part question and part statement, you would still use a question mark at the end of such sentences. So usually sentences that have a question tag, which is basically this part at the end of it, is ended with a question mark. Now, another way we use the question mark is after a question in direct speech. So direct speech is the speech which is written, which is directly quoted by someone or said by someone. Let's take an example. She said, where are you? So here I'm asking a question and therefore I add a question mark at the end of my question statement. Now because the question mark or the question is part of my direct speech, even the question mark will come in between my quotation marks. So do not use the question mark after the quotation marks unless the entire statement is asking a question. For example, had I said, when did she say, where are you? So in this sentence, I am asking a question in my indirect speech, in my indirect statement, which is when did she say. However, this part is a question, so you could also add the question mark in between here, showing me that what she asked or the direct speech or the direct part of the sentence is a question. And because my entire statement is a question, I add the question mark at the end or after the quotation marks as well. So you have to think about whether your entire statement is a question or whether only your direct speech is a question in order to know when to place the question mark before or after the quotation marks. Now let's move on. We do not use exclamatory sentences followed by question marks. What this means is that the question mark will not follow sentences which begin with the WH word showing exclamation. An example is, what a day. This is making an exclamation. It is not stating a question. So it will not end with a question mark even though it begins with a question word. Because this is showing me an exclamation or surprise or excitement, and it should end well with an exclamation mark, which you'll learn about later. So do not get confused with WH words. You need to first identify if the sentence is a question or whether it is actually an exclamatory sentence, which is showing me great show of emotion or surprise or shock, etc. So I hope you've understood now how and when to use the question mark. Don't get confused.